Hello and welcome to another video where I wanted to do one that I haven't done in a while, where I just sort of pick a topic and get to ramble over it, and hopefully some of it makes sense and some of it is helpful. Instead of going through another list or anything like that, I think this set is right now, if you've got an event coming up, it's quite clear the decks are sort of built for you. Green Blue has been built for you, and Sapphire Steel is built for you, and then there's some room in Amethyst Steel to build in different directions, and Amber Steel is always the same, and Dogs has loads of interesting stuff. But right now, I think, in my opinion, Sapphire is the deck to beat. I think if we're looking at this chart right now that we got from Ink Decks, a lot of this data is directly from set 10. A lot of this is still leaning over from set 9, but even if we look at pie charts like we did in my last video, Amethyst Steel was taking up a 22% share at an event, and it was just kind of really dominating, I think. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. Sapphire as a color has a bit of a buy-in right now. If you want to play one of the Green Blues or one of the Sapphire Steels, or even still, I guess, playing Amethyst Sapphire, but I wouldn't count that in the top options. I think it has quite a bit of a buy-in, whereas Amethyst Steel, right now most people have it built. It's always been a fairly affordable and cheap deck. It's just sort of the basic Amethyst package, some docks, some Strength of Raging Fire, which is now was a £10 card or so, is now a free promo you can get at your league nights. It's a fairly affordable deck, and all you really do is anything you pack from set 10, you can just throw in there. I mean, in my opinion, Lexington is the best card they could have added to that deck, but if you want to try out Demonas, you put some Demonas in there. If you want to try out the new Hades, you can put them in there. But like none of that really, I think, overall impacts the deck. Whereas with the Sapphire decks, Emerald Sapphire and Sapphire Steel right now, they all are kind of built around playing the Cinderella card. So if you don't have 4 of those Cinderellas, maybe just throw in as many copies as you've opened, or you can do the buy-in, which could be around £200 or so, depending. I don't really know what they set right now. I think they're £40 each, so maybe a little bit less, but it does look like sort of Sapphire decks, and it's, in my opinion, it's got to a point where Sapphire in general is so strong because of the Cinderella card and the Tipo and Sail. It's like you can just pick Sail, Tipo, and Cinderella. Pick, so there's 12 cards taken up there, and then I don't really care what the other cards are that you put in there, because the game plan when you have those ramp cards is so good. Like, I'm not saying those other cards can be really bad, but I don't care if it's John Silver, Tinkerbell, Hades, if it's Under the Sea, if it's Spooky Sight, if it's Vincenzo, if it's whatever it is. All those cards are just so powerful when you combine it with the ink advantage that you get in Lorcana. I think it always feels mad when you're on the draw and you're about two ink, they pass back to you and they've ramped onto Cinderella, and they're going to be at 6 ink when you pass it back, and you're passing it across with 3 ink, and starting that turn with 2 ink always feels really horrible. It feels like you're so far behind, and just hoping that maybe they resource themselves out or they brick at some point, because when the Sapphire decks get to do what they want to do, they're very unbeatable. But as I say that, I think this video should be talking about how you can sort of beat Sapphire if you don't want to play it. I kind of myself, I know I'm a big fan of Sapphire Steel. That's kind of the deck that I have the most fond memories and attention of, and I just always love that color combo. But in this set, it just hasn't felt like the same deck to me. It just feels like you just do the ramp on 2 Cinderella, then play a big body every turn. And from last set when I was playing Blurple, I just didn't want to be part of those mirrors where it felt like the agency wasn't as much involved. It was more just down to who got to see their top end more, and if you didn't find your ramp, then you were very far behind. If your opponent gets 2 Hades back to back and all you've done is play a hook into a into a Tinkerbell, you just feel like you kind of lose that game. So going into like, how do you beat these really strong Sapphire decks? And I think, as I say, most of the decks are built around these 12 locked in cards with Tipo, Sail, and Cinderella, which is great, but they're still trying to figure out other things. I think Sapphire Steel is pretty locked in. They're going to ramp into Tinkerbell, they're going to ramp into Goliath, but there is one card that sort of floats around in their lists, is Spooky Sight. You just kind of need to play around Spooky Sight or not. It's really strange. I have someone I test with daily, and one day I'll play into them and I'll play my Amber Steel, and I'm playing around Spooky Sight, but they've swapped it for Under the Sea, and then the next day they've swapped the Under the Sea back into a Spooky Sight, and I'm like, what is your green blue list? Like, where does it land? Like, what is it actually you're including? So right now we don't really know all the cards that they're running, which can make it quite hard to test into. But for me, if I want to build Sapphire, I'm just trying to basically go under it. And I think Amethyst Steel has the best options for that. By the way, I just wanted to point out this is like sort of standard Sapphire Steel list. I got 3 lists ready, and just for the buy-in on this sort of build, and I don't know if this is the most optimal. This is just someone who did very well at an event, and I got it off Inkdex. I think Inkdex is very good for finding all of the data and everything you need. And look, yeah, you need 4 of these, and then the rest of the stuff is still not cheap, and I assume it will get a bit more of a higher price as well as the set goes on. Just, you know, Hades being a 4x and everything. It has been printed in 2 sets, which always keeps them at a fairly good price, but it's just a big buy-in. And if you're only really competing at, you know, local level, and maybe you get we only get 3 DLCs in each country now as well, so, you know, the buy-in to what you could get back is quite strange, really. So if you're only competing at a local level, you know, do you really want to buy 4 Cinderellas, 4 Goliaths just to play your store champs in your local league? Probably not. But this is sort of the standard list for Sapphire Steel. And then in the green-blue, I didn't want to ever put a green-blue list on the screen because they seem to change so often. I see a detective package, then a non-detective package. But yeah, it's just sort of very simple what we have here. But if I'm going into like beating Sapphire, these are the 2 sort of decks I'd want to look at. And maybe I could have zoomed in a little bit more on this, but this is the Amber Steel that I've been promoting for quite a bit. And I think it's probably the scariest thing that the Sapphire decks can go against, which is very strange because Amber Steel had a very rough matchup into Green Blue in the last set. But with Mowgli added, just the fact that you're on the play game is still so quick that you win. It's strange. They all thought they could cut John Silver from a lot of their lists because they just thought that aggro wouldn't survive in this game. No, it does, and it survives very, very well. And you could just sort of race ahead on the play, and, you know, if you win the die roll, you're probably going to win the game because Daisy Nala are still a very impactful play, especially if they're going to commit the next 2 turns for Tipo into Cinderella is ramp rather than fighting for that board, and then they hope they claw it back. You play a Mowgli, take their answer, whatever. It's very, very strong. And Mowgli is also a good way on the draw, just to say I'm going to cut the Under the Sea or the spooky sight from their hand. The only thing they really have to play that is useful, I find, is John Silver, and that's still a character that can be dealt with Strength of the Raging Fire or Cannons, or you can maybe put Thunderbolt in if you really so desired and try and mass it up and find 1 more damage. But I think, yeah, this is the very good approach to playing into the Sapphire decks. I think just all round, you have the best matchup win rate into the Sapphire decks. But I think the one issue as well you're going to come across is that the Amethyst Steel decks are probably going to beat you, and they got a lot more tools and they got a lot more useful things. And again, this is not my list, this is just the list I found on Inkdex. I wanted to grab some people's list. I couldn't find an Amber Steel one, that's why I used my own one, a set 10 one on here that had like decent results. So I just went for putting my own one on the screen. But this is an Amethyst Steel list, and yeah, I think, in my opinion right now, if you build Amethyst Steel in an appropriate way, it is probably the strongest deck in the game, and you would still accept that your matchup into Sapphire Steel is one of the weaker matchups. So too much. I've been playing a bit of Amethyst Steel. I've been playing tons of different builds. You know, I'm very grateful I get to chat to JDRR. Been playing his, been building my own, been trying out loads of cards. I really like the sort of burn approaches that a lot of people have been playing. You know, we just do full burn lists because into the Sapphire decks they really struggle with that. You know, if you're just every turn you just on play gain some lore, and they can't really use any of their control cards to stop you from doing that. But I think you can take some standard ones. You know, there's there's actually everything in here is pretty standard. I thought there wasn't a giant cobra, but I'm blind apparently. I think you can just take a very standard list like this and put some more aggressive cards in the deck, like that 3-cost Tinkerbell in there, just to kind of aggressively gain your lore. And as I say, there's some more burn editions where they just play like Gathering Wisdom and Knowledge. You could even put locations in there just to be very awkward. Remember, Sapphire, like, always, I mean, pretty much most control decks struggle with the number 4. So if you were to play Palace Guard and then maybe play a 4 health 1-cost location as well, just to keep like putting more stuff on the board and more for them to answer, there isn't really much location removal, and Rush is sort of dead in the game right now. So, you know, even Hermes, the 3-cost 3/3, wouldn't be enough to take out a location on your board. So just trying to be obnoxious with things like that, pretty good. I just think overall, I think the coming into the deck as well with the 4 Cobras and the 4 White Roses, you know, already having that built-in lore. Imagine if you still had Goat in this format. You know, that was sort of the thing, was Amethyst Steel was able to sort of fight off a lot of these Sapphire decks in past sets, especially Ruby Sapphire, because it just played a lot of burn. And you watched even in the finals that DKP did at Worlds, you know, he built a very much a burn based Sapphire Steel, where Sapphire Steel, Amethyst Steel, where it was a lot of card draw because you get a lot of card draw on Amethyst, and you get a lot of lore that you could gain from not questing. And, you know, I just think this is probably the best approach to it. I still don't think your matchup into Sapphire Steel is amazingly good. I think maybe you can bring it to a 50-50, and by adding in a bit more aggressive, like, burn cards and locations maybe, and maybe the Tinkerbell, maybe more evasions and, you know, all those things, I think you probably bring that matchup close to a 50-50. I think on the draw, you're still probably going to struggle if they're going to be able to ramp into Tink, into Vincenzo, into Hades. But I still think it probably has one of the best shots in the game at beating all of the Sapphire decks. I think your matchup into Sapphire Emerald, surprisingly, I've always said, I mean, even my last video I said that I think it is the is like your best matchup. I still think it is your best matchup, but it's a lot closer than I thought it was. And, you know, if you're both on very good skill levels, it's very, very close indeed as well. But yeah, like this sort of build where you're just putting a bit more burn in there, I think is great. I think Hades, I don't love that card, but it basically says draw 2 and establish a 3/4 that quest for 1, which is pretty nice. But yeah, I think right now the best thing to play in the game is a more aggressive, or, you know, Amethyst Steel, I think, in general, because when I look at these pie charts, Amethyst Steel is top number 1. Like, what I'm saying is basically being represented by the tier lists here. I think it is number 1, but of course its matchup into Sapphire Steel is very bad. But I kind of, when I look at these, I combine all of the Sapphire together because, to be honest with you, they're all like the same deck, just, you know, the other 48 cards different compared to the Tipo Sale and the Cinderella, and you can play whatever 48 other cards you want. But I think, yeah, playing an Amethyst Steel that's a bit more tech towards beating the Sapphire decks just seems a very strong way to go. I think as well, you clear up all of the aggro decks that are there designed to beat the Sapphire decks. And I'm pretty sure this is, like I say, this is the pie chart that you have. You have the big control decks at the top, the Sapphire, the aggro decks that want to beat them, and then the mid-range deck. But the thing of Amethyst Steel is you can still also build it a bit to beat the control decks by being a bit more an aggro, Sapphire-y burn deck, which is kind of fun. But I think you don't want to go so far that you lose your aggro matchup and you lose the benefits in the aggro matchup. So trying to build it in a way that it kind of can defeat all of them and be best deck in the game. But still, its matchup with the Sapphire Steel is not amazing, but I think you can bring it at least to a 50-50. So I think the best way to kind of tackle the meta right now is, of course, myself, I want to say it's just Amber Steel aggro. I think if your locals, everyone's bought into playsets of Cindy's, just bring Amber Steel aggro and everyone will dislike you because you're just going to run over their game plan and not let them have fun. But if I was going to a bigger event, to a CCQ, whatever, it's pretty clear that Amethyst Steel has been doing very well, and it's been doing very well for the last set as well, with Frank Carsten doing great with it on his awesome, like, one-off based lists. But yeah, I think right now it seems like Sapphire is the color to get, but I think buying into Amethyst Steel is just a better option. I think you're going to get better results with it. If you just like Sapphire and you like ramp, please, like, I'm not discouraging you from playing Cinderellas and buying into that deck, but I think the way to beat it in this set, and the best thing to play right now, is probably Amethyst Steel. And we can all join Amethyst Steel mirrors and tech heavy for them as well. That would be fun if we all just buy into that.